When I first moved to Portugal, everything felt cheap compared to what I was used to in the US. And that's exactly the trap. Because when everything feels like a deal, it's easy to slowly spend more than you planned to without ever noticing it happening. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how lifestyle creep snuck into my own budget, what it actually cost me before I caught it, and how I catch myself before it happens now. If you appreciate this type of content, gently tap that like button. Let's get into it. Alright, first, let's talk about what lifestyle creep actually is, because it's not the same as overspending in an obvious way. Nobody sits down and decides to blow their budget. It happens gradually, one small upgrade at a time. You go out to eat one extra time a week because it's still cheaper than back home. You upgrade one purchase because, again, it's still a bargain by American standards. None of it feels reckless in the moment. That's what makes it dangerous. It's not a single bad decision. It's dozens of small, individually reasonable decisions that quietly stack up into something you never actually planned for. Next, why moving somewhere more affordable actually makes this worse instead of better. This is the part nobody warns you about. You'd think cheaper cost of living automatically means more savings, but it doesn't work that way if you don't stay intentional. Every purchase here gets measured against US prices in your head, and almost everything comes out looking like a deal. So instead of saving the difference, you slowly spend it, just on slightly nicer versions of things you didn't even plan to upgrade. There's actually a mental math trap hiding underneath all of this. When you first move somewhere with a lower cost of living, you spend the first several months doing constant currency conversion in your head. Something costs 12 euros, and your brain immediately tells you, that's basically nothing. That would have been $20 back home. And on its own, that thought isn't wrong. But when you do that calculation dozens of times a week, every single purchase clears that bar. Everything feels like a deal because, individually, it usually is one. The problem is your budget doesn't care about individual deals. It cares about the total, and the total doesn't feel real until you actually add it up. Now let's get specific, because this happened to me directly. I tend to eat out more, due to the affordable prato de dia lunch specials that include a meat or fish option with house wine included. Depending where you go, ranges from 9 euros up to 13 euros in local neighborhoods. I also tend to go into this home furnishing store in the mall, called Homa, which has amazing home decor, and I always find something to make my apartment feel more cozy. It wasn't one big purchase that threw me off. It was a string of small ones that each felt justified on their own. Looking back, I couldn't point to a single moment where I decided to spend more. It was more like a slow drift, where my monthly spending crept up a little at a time, and I didn't notice the shape of it until I actually sat down and looked at the numbers together instead of one purchase at a time. That was actually the moment that really got my attention, sitting down at the end of a few months and comparing what I thought I was spending to what I'd actually spent. The gap surprised me. Not because any single purchase was irresponsible, but because the accumulation of, it's basically free compared to back home, thinking had quietly added up to real money, month after month, without a single moment where it felt like a decision. Here's what I do differently now. I decided to stick to a monthly budget that allows me to only spend a certain amount on certain categories for home, personal, and other miscellaneous expenses. It's not complicated, but it forces me to actually see what I'm spending, instead of just feeling like everything's a bargain and letting that feeling run the show. The goal isn't to stop enjoying the lower cost of living here, because that's genuinely one of the best parts of this move. The goal is to make sure I'm choosing to spend, instead of just drifting into it because everything feels inexpensive in the moment. Quick break, check the description and the pinned comment below for helpful resources on this topic. Let me give you a specific moment where I caught myself. I love to shop for the latest trends in fashion, and two of my favorite shops, of course, is Lefties and Zara's. When I go into either, I always come out with something I particularly don't need. That was the moment it really clicked for me. That cheap and smart spending aren't the same thing, and I needed a system instead of relying on gut feeling. It's one thing to know intellectually that small purchases add up. It's another thing to actually feel it happening in real time and catch yourself before you follow through. The real mindset shift wasn't about cutting things out completely. It was about separating what actually adds to my life here from what I'm buying just because it's available and feels inexpensive. Some of those upgrades genuinely have made my life better, and I don't regret them at all. I currently invested on a new floor fan and rice cooker, and feel those items have made my life easier and worth the purchase. That distinction matters, because this isn't a video about depriving yourself just because you moved somewhere more affordable. It's about making sure the spending is intentional instead of automatic. Others were just noise, spending that crept in without ever earning its place in my budget. And honestly, being able to tell the difference between those two categories has been more useful to me than any specific budgeting app or spreadsheet. It's less about tracking every euro perfectly and more about pausing long enough to ask whether something is actually improving my life here, or whether it's just easy to justify because of the exchange rate. Now, who really needs to hear this? If you're planning a move somewhere with a lower cost of living, or you've already made that move, this is worth thinking about. Before the savings you're expecting quietly disappear into small upgrades you didn't plan for. It's easy to assume the math will work itself out just because things are cheaper. It won't, not unless you're paying attention. This applies whether you're moving to Portugal specifically, or really anywhere that feels significantly more affordable than where you're coming from. Looking back, lifestyle creep has honestly been a bigger threat to my budget here than any big, obvious expense. The big costs, rent, healthcare, groceries, those are easy to track because they show up clearly every month. It's the small stuff that adds up quietly in the background. The extra coffee out, the slightly nicer bottle of wine at a trendy restaurant, hairdresser appointments, nail appointments, the little upgrades that each individually made sense. And that's exactly why I had to build a habit around catching it instead of assuming I'd notice on my own. And if you want the full breakdown of what things actually cost here, I made a video on exactly that. You can check it out by clicking right here. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.